All right, so just a day after the United States blamed the WHO for being very China-centric, the world's most powerful body, the United Nations Security Council, is expected to meet today to discuss the coronavirus pandemic. The decision comes after 9 council members wrote to the UNSC presidency requesting for an immediate meeting. Now, keep this in mind that this meet comes after 9 non-permanent members called for it. Neither the United States, France or the United Kingdom have called for the meeting. The Council President for the month of April is the Dominican Republic and has formally scheduled a closed video conference, teleconference meeting. The meeting will be regarding the impact of COVID-19 on issues that fall under the UNSC mandate. But why is this meeting coming after almost 3 months? Well, this is because Beijing is no longer calling the shots. When Beijing was the Council President last month, they kept blocking the initiative, and Beijing had even claimed that the pandemic was not a peace and security issue. Beyond the optics of the meeting, the world community will be hoping for a UNSC resolution on the pandemic, and there are 2 drafts that are currently in circulation. Now, one amongst the permanent members and another amongst the non-permanent member states. The Security Council could take up any of the 2. UNSC sources have told WION that Tunisia has produced the first draft of the resolution, which could be negotiated initially amongst the elected members of the Council. Subsequently, a French-led draft resolution will also be discussed exclusively amongst the permanent 5. The most important one is by Estonia. This resolution highlights the growing concerns about the unprecedented extent of the coronavirus outbreak. It calls for full transparency over the pandemic. Remember, this proposal was rejected by China last month. A council resolution is binding on all UN member states and will help mobilize resources on a war footing. Now, US media reports claim that Washington insists that the resolution should mention that the virus emerged in China's Wuhan. So what are the possible outcomes? Well, the outcome of today's UNSC meet depends entirely on the proposals and have China and its ally Russia exercise their veto powers. Now, there are 2 possible scenarios. The first one is that the resolution fails. This could happen if China and Russia, either of them, were to decide to vote against it. It could also fail if it gets less than 9 votes in the 15-member council. The second scenario is that the resolution passes. This works if all permanent members and 4 other members vote for the resolution. It could also work if both China or Russia were to abstain from voting. Now, UNSC, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres will also be briefing the Council on the pandemic. Guterres is likely to raise his demand for a ceasefire in all conflict zones on account of the global health emergency. And also, WION's Siddhant Sibal, who's been tracking the story very closely, has sent us this report. Listen in.
The United Nations Security Council is all set to meet today. It will be meeting at 3 p.m. New York time, or that means 12:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time on Friday morning, and focus will be on the COVID crisis. We know that 9 members of the United Nations Security Council on 2nd of April had approached the President of UNSC for the current month, Dominican Republic, and had asked that this meeting should take place. And we also know there are 2 drafts on the table. One is the French draft and another is the Tunisian draft. The Tunisian one supported by the elected members, while the French one is being discussed by the permanent members of the Security Council. We know that the United Nations Secretary General is also going to brief the UNSC regarding the current situation, the humanitarian situation, the response, and also the impact. He has called for a global ceasefire on 23rd of March, and he is getting positive response. But by and large, the world has seen that UN has been missing at the time of this global crisis, and it is after 4 months when the first case was reported in Wuhan, China, that UNSC is meeting. Last month, there were attempts by countries, especially Estonia, for the meeting of UNSC countries through video conference, but China wasn't enthusiastic and had thwarted with the help of the Russians and South Africans. And we also know that China was the president of UNSC for the last month. But by and large, we have seen emergence of G20 at a time when the world needed leadership. We know that the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had called G20 countries for video conference, and G20 is now trying to ready an action plan to deal with this crisis.